Welcome to part 2 of the raised bed garden tour. This is our kitchen garden. And so this is one of my other favorite parts. I mean, let's be honest, every part of the garden is my favorite, but I love this area because of the height of the raised beds. The height of the raised beds is so much easier on my back rather than the 1 foot high raised beds that you saw in part 1. If you haven't watched part 1, I'd highly suggest watching part 1 because there's so many good details, layouts, plants, all of those good things in there. So today we're going to share with you the layouts of our garden, how they're designed, what we have placed where, why, how big things get. We're not going to go into deep detail on the actual healing benefits of certain plants. We'll save that for another video. So today is just about the layout, so that way you can see it. We're doing a video when things are small so you can see my spacing, so when it grows in you're not like, how did you do that, you know? So there's a really good video for then for you to reference the spacing and the layouts, and you can really see it better. I know it may sound crazy, but one of the things that you may not find a lot of in our raised beds this year is food. This area we have more food than the other area in part 1. But the reason for that is it's not because we're not growing food. We're actually growing more food than ever, but we're doing that all out in our ground plot this year because we're growing larger amounts for canning and freezing this year. We really want to utilize our gardens in a way that we can use them all year, because here in Wisconsin, Zone 5, we have a very short growing season, so we really want to utilize that and eat fresh and eat what we grew because we know where it came from, and it always tastes better, and if you've grown food before, you know that. So we're going to share with you, we do have some vegetables mixed in, flowers, healing plants, so we're really dedicating our raised beds this year to really expanding our knowledge in the use of plants over just, you know, eating and flowers and prettiness. So let's get started. So this garden, I always prefer it to be a little bit more visual than our other gardens, mainly because it is seen from our sitting spaces here. So I always still try to add something that's either for food or an herb or something. So it's not just pure flowers, but I always like something that has a lot of color. So that way when I'm sitting here, you can see the butterflies or the bees, and you see things having fun. Right in front of your eyes it plays out. It's really cool to see. So in order to get that, what we did is we put more flowers along the front of our raised bed here. So you'll find some zinnias we have in here. We did some Verbena bonariensis, which will get about around 24 inches at the very most. It gets a lot of like cluster purple flowers, draws in the butterflies and other great beneficials. We have some snaps, some blue Victoria salvia, which you kind of saw in part 1 where we kind of used a lot of these same varieties, and the reason why we use them is because they're really easy to seed start, it's affordable, and we just love the benefits that it brings to the garden and the combination of color. It's soothing to the eye. So in here too, we kind of have a pattern. So the pattern is one large triangle from that corner to this middle, all the way to that corner, and we created that pattern with eucalyptus. So this eucalyptus is the neglected eucalyptus. They don't return for us in Wisconsin, so they're not going to get like a tree like they would in other places. Even though when we do bring eucalyptus into the greenhouse, it does grow more tree-like, but it never gets like an actual tree because you can only keep it for so long in the greenhouse because you only got so much height that you can grow it at. But these ones here are going to grow in the garden, and they're going to stay in the garden. Once before it freezes, we're going to harvest the eucalyptus for all different types of things, which we'll go over throughout the season. And then we also have our millets in the flowering area. So I love millet grass. Millet grass is great to draw in the birds. So if you're a complete bird nerd like us, you'll definitely want to add some millet. And we also leave it in the winter. We leave all of our gardens in the winter, but we love adding these types of grasses and leaving the sunflowers up. The birds come in and they eat all winter on it. Once they seed out, they get these beautiful blue, dark black plumes on them. The little finches come in, the little brown birds, and they actually fight each other for it too. It's kind of fun to watch. They have a lot of fun in the morning, and we have a lot of fun watching them. And then on the back corners, we did our onions. So I'm not sure which one, well, this one here. Okay, this one is the red onions over here. And these ones are just white onions over here. So we have a nice little onion harvest that'll happen right here. And then we're gonna also add more to our ground plot out there because they store so well. For us, we can get them to store at least through January. You can also freeze onions, which are nice to add into chilies or on top of pizzas. They do get softer, but I actually like that. I feel like it adds more flavor because when they thaw on top of a pizza, it adds more of the flavor of the onion. So that's, I'm getting hungry now. I want pizza and it's only like 9 in the morning. So, yeah, and then, oh, on every corner, I don't want to forget this because this is going to be very, like, aesthetically beautiful. We did do the vines on every corner. So some have just some morning glories. I don't know what colors they're going to be because we did seed start these and we kind of just threw the seed in the pots. But then I also added some seeds directly sown right where we planted them so that way it gets more full and vigorous. All right, so this is our really established herb garden, so a lot of things that we put in here have returned. So this right here is one of my favorites. It's anise hyssop. So it's gonna, pretty soon, it'll start putting out these beautiful purple plumes which just draw the bees into it. And don't be afraid of that because the bees don't bother you. As long as you don't bother them on it, they don't bother you. But they come in here and then they hit up everything else, which is nice because they're pollinating. They're really helping things happen in your garden. Without the bees, we wouldn't have a garden. And then over here we have our tarragon, which is getting wildly crazy. I'm gonna have to like do something with this soon. It's about to flower out, as you can tell on the top. So this is our first year having tarragon. We planted this last year, and so now it's returning and kind of giving us a show that I wasn't really expecting from tarragon. So this is something we'll just have to see what it does. So in this space here, I know it looks ugly because we get a lot of mint. Like on the edge here, we have tons of mint, and that's fine, but it's very aggressive. So just know wherever you're gonna put mint, it's gonna really just flow through. You know, it's gonna have ropes of roots and shoot up in areas you didn't expect it. It even shoots up in between the boards in front of the raised bed, which I actually like. I love that look. It appeals to me. It's wild and really cool, natural looking. But what you have to do with it if you're planting things near it is really control it. So as long as you got time to control it, then that's fine. And we do, because that's what we do. So inside of here I did do the, let's see, it's the lime basil. I actually have lime basil in here, and it hasn't really done much. It really struggled since I seeded it. Lime basil should be a lot larger. It's not as large or aggressive as like regular basil or lemon basil. It is more, you know, petite, but it should get at least, you know, 12 to 18 inches at the most if you're including its flowers. So as I can see, there's already flowers coming on it because it stayed in its little cell after seeding for almost too long. If something stays in a small cell for too long, you're really stopping it from being able to grow, and then just kind of goes right into production of its flower, which sometimes stunts the actual growth of the plant. So what I'm going to have to do is just go ahead and really just take off some of these flowers that it's producing on there, because once you take those off, that will help it really just focus on the growth of that actual plant. Otherwise it's just going to keep getting taken over by the mint, and I have to keep moving that mint out. But if that were to grow above the mint, I wouldn't have to worry about it as much. So the anise hyssop does smell like black licorice, so if you're not a fan of black licorice, then it probably isn't the plant for you. But if you're not going to focus on smelling it all the time like I do, it's just a good ad for attracting the pollinators. And the lime basil, we just took a break to smell that too. It is potent. It smells so good and so much like lime. It's awesome. These are ones that I wish that once again there was a little smell button that you guys could really smell. But one day in the future, it'll be nice to, you know, have the tours and have the workshops so you can really be hands-on and really get involved and touch everything, smell everything. one day, you know, so that's what we're working towards. So on this side, it may be hard to see, so I'm gonna part the waters. So here we go. Over here we got oregano, and this returned from last year. We do have a lot of oregano planted in the part 1 video in another garden. But oregano is just great to have to dry, to have your own herbs. It's really nice to really dry your own herbs because you know where they came from, you know what the process was, and it's kind of sometimes like when you're buying herbs in the store, even if they do say organic, it's like, what's really inside this bottle? You know, because they're dried, they're already like ground or flaked, and it's like you really don't know what you're really getting in there. So for us, it's very important to know what's in there. And I wish we were more like that with everything we ate, like, you know, junk food. It just doesn't always happen that way, but we're just becoming more aware of what it is that, you know, we're eating, what we're putting into our bodies, and things like that. Just like for our overall health, you know, we want to stay healthy. We've got a young family, and, you know, we just want to be able to do things with the kids and not feel lethargic with health problems on the couch. So our overall goal is to just really, you know, use our garden to maintain our health and, you know, do as much as we can. So and then we do have volunteers of sunflowers. We get a lot of volunteers in this garden. I don't know if you guys remember, but for those of you that haven't watched us, we had this giant like sunflower. It went all the way up to the top of the house. We're gonna pan all the way up there. So it went all the way up to there. That was the height, no lie. If you go to past videos or go to our Instagram or whatever and you want to see a picture, you can see it there. Jason's like trying to touch it. You can't even touch it. It was crazy. And we did not see that. I did not know what variety it was. I thought maybe it was like Titan, but Titan is a big yellow flower, and this was more of like an old-fashioned sunflower, kind of like a mammoth, but it was too big to even be a mammoth. It was almost like a crossbreed between the two, but that's what's volunteering there. We kind of discussed this in our last video, once again, with our little walkthrough in the morning, so you can watch more information about that there. But a lot of times we're going to probably end up like removing some of these volunteers because we don't want it overshading the garden and the varieties of plants that we need. And because sunflowers can easily take over, but they also do create a nice shade, especially for some of your cool crops, which is nice. You don't want to plant them too close to the cool crops because they get such a huge root system, but if you can place them in the direction that would kind of give them a few hours of a break from the sun as they grow up, that's always perfect to put, you know, somewhere near to add that shade for, you know, lettuce or carrots or your radishes, all that kind of stuff. So then behind the sunflowers here, we do have chives. So these we just cut for, you know, different salads and casseroles and stuff like that. This here we have a lemon balm, which is nice. Like a lemon basil type of a one. I actually don't even know the pure name of this one because this is something we grew that I never knew would even return, and it did. But it smells like the lemon. So that's like a lemon balm type of a plant, even though the balm sometimes has a different leaf than this, so I'll have to figure that out. We'll see. We get a lot of volunteers of dill. I talked about this in part 1 a lot. And then we have our radishes here, which I love our radishes. So the 2 new varieties that we grew this year aren't producing yet. Let's see. So we still have some time with those, but a variety that we did last year, I don't remember the name, that one's been producing some. So here we go, we got one here, and I'd eat it right now, but they're spicy. I learned that in our last video. I didn't learn it, but I knew it. I knew it was coming, but I didn't think they'd be that spicy yet. A lot of times our radishes get spicier the more time that we get warmer weather. The warmer weather it is, the more it like kicks up the spiciness for us. So I'm gonna save this for later. These are perfect for chopping into a salad to get just a little hint of that spiciness. But eating it on its own, if you like spiciness, you'll just love these. But if you are very sensitive to spiciness like me, you'll just want to do it in small amounts. But Jason would go crazy over this. So we went a little long on the last raised bed, so I'm going to kind of, you know, speed it up a little bit so I don't like have your eyes glazing over and talk too much. I just want to really be able to share what we planted and the spacing, but it's really hard to just stay on topic of that when I have so much to share about all the plants because I love them and I'm passionate about them. But I also know you guys have busy lives too, so let's keep rolling onto this bed now. All right, so we're going to focus here. Okay, so on the end caps, I always do more visual things, but I only do a small section, so it's not a lot of stuff. So we just have this Super Tunia. It's called Sharon, and what I love about it is that it's a little double, and it's got some really cute striping in it. So that'll get nice and larger over here. At least I'm hoping it will. It's not in potting soil. Or a big growing mixture. It's in, you know, a raised bed, so the soil may affect the, you know, amount that it grows and everything like that. So we got some Milligrasses here. We kind of talked about that in the last raised bed and why we add them. We have a couple snaps just to kind of, you know, flare it up a little bit. These ones do get tall, but I love adding tall snaps to areas so that way they actually fall over. I don't want them to stand up straight. I'm not looking to cut them. I'm just looking to have them there for beneficials and pollinators. So when they kind of fall over, then they kind of just like swoop down with their flowers really cool. So I even add them into containers for trailing. I know that sounds crazy to add a cut flower for trailing, but if it's not standing up, the flower always, if the plant falls, the flower always reaches up for the sun. So it kind of comes up like a hook, and then they all come up that way, and it looks really fun. It looks like they're like dancing up towards the sun. Cool. And then over here we added some more eucalyptus. So these are also just for growing this season and harvesting at the end. We could dig them up and plant them up, but we're not planning on doing that. Over here then we do have our parsley. We love parsley. I'm Italian. Parsley is a big part of being Italian, and it's also one of my main ingredients for rice balls. This is the Giant of Italy, which is my favorite variety because it is super hardy, especially for us here in Wisconsin. I was harvesting this in December on Christmas Eve when I was making the rice balls and frying and mixing. And what's really nice about these is that when they kind of die out, so don't expect them to be like this type of plant at that point. When they die off and they kind of like freeze and fall over, just leave the plant and then you can go underneath it. That's where you clip the good fresh parsley till that point in time in the winter. It's kind of a unique little tip that you should definitely try in your garden. So then over here we just have some red cabbage. We love cabbage. We love making a lot of stuff with cabbage. We can go into more of that another time. And then just of course a little selection and collection of the Salvia Blue Victoria and some snaps over here. So we're giving the cabbage some adequate space to really grow in and, you know, create its little circle here. And we plant them closer to the edge so that way they kind of fill in, kind of coming this way, and allow the flowers to kind of grow in, so you get really pretty colors, but then you get these beautiful rich purple leaves as it grows. It's really beautiful. Who knew cabbage could be so beautiful in the garden, right? This whole section, we actually describe and talk in depth about this section in the video before this one. We'll add that here again. I know we keep referencing that one, but we kind of did a small little tour of things. So we'll leave that for that. That is dill, in case you do not know. All volunteered, by the way, and we go over that. And then over here we have St. John's wort. So you want to make sure to put this in an area that isn't going to get invasive for you, and this does get larger. So this is somewhere where we're going to have this every single year. It will be here for us next year too, so it will fill in this whole space. This is another one of those medicinal healing plants that we're learning about. And we can go more into detail on that like a whole nother time. So, all right, so we're moving on to the next bed. This one should be pretty simple. So down the center here we have Hound, which is new for us. It's a very medicinal plant used for colds and coughs and sore throats and all of that stuff and plenty more. We can go more into detail on that in the future. And so with Hound, it does flower, and so it really draws in pollinators, and it draws in flies too, but not like flies to annoy the heck out of you. It's more so a great addition to add next to peppers and tomatoes and things like that. So this bed is a lot of healing and food. And one of our favorite peppers is the Lunchbox Pepper, and that's Lana and Selah's favorite especially, so we did lots of those. And I mainly grew just the orange and the red. I didn't do the mix this year, so we seeded them on our own. So you'll find the red on one side and the orange on the other. And we did 2 plants and then a zinnia. 2 plants and then a zinnia. Zinnias always help bring in beneficials too, but it's also just to add that additional little color. It's going to be a pretty little hot pink flower. So it'll just be a nice little divide in between all of the green and the food and the healing. And then on the end over here, we have 2 sun sugar tomatoes. These are going to be huge. They're going to go up and over. We will eventually have to kind of stake and cage these so they don't just spill over and then they're just exposed with the soil here. Otherwise, if they're exposed with the soil there, it dries out a lot quicker and then you're watering more. You could add some type of mulching, whether it's like wood mulch or grass clippings or maybe even a little bit of straw, but that's not what we plan on doing. We use our plants to really shade the surface of the soil to really hold in the moisture, and that's why I do kind of keep things a little bit closer. As things grow, it suppresses the weeds too, so we really don't have a lot of weeding once mid-July comes. So it makes gardening a lot easier. So with the Hound, it is a slower grower, so it's not something that's going to fill in right away. I don't really know how fast it's going to grow. I don't really like to Google things. I'm not one to search things and really like learn every little thing about a plant. I like to be more hands-on and learn about it through growing it, and that's just my best way of learning when I'm learning things in the garden. So you won't find me, binge watching, garden content or looking up garden content. Everything I learn is through just the process of doing and finding what works for me. And what I found is everybody has a way of doing something. There really is no wrong way. So if you learn something somewhere else and we teach it some other way, I always say focus on the end game. If the finish point is the same and the result is the same, then that's all that matters. And like I said on the end caps, I love adding flowers, but here we didn't have to add anything. We had so many volunteers from last year. Last year here we had the Love Lies Bleeding Amaranthus, it got huge with those big red ropes, and it was so gorgeous, and we did a lot of that last year because we did have that really big Halloween shoot for Better Homes and Gardens Tricks and Treats. So I'm really excited to see how that all turned out. It'll be coming out in fall. So these all were volunteers from that time when we had that here. So we're just kind of allowing it to do its thing. I know it looks kind of like it's coming in heavy, but I've never done it that way with them. But we're going to just allow it to happen, and we'll see. We'll all see and kind of, follow that process as it goes. And we also have some larkspur just kind of going ahead and volunteering here. We actually had quite a few of those in our garden last year, and so wherever they popped up I let them, because last year we seeded them and then planted plants, and they kind of did, they had one flower, they didn't do much, but now I'm noticing them popping up as volunteers from last year, and they look so much better, so much more hardy and full, and they're going to have way more blooms. So if I ever did these again in the garden, I would definitely add them as more of like a direct sow, and then or just let them volunteer. So larkspur can also be a little bit toxic, so maybe look that up a little bit, especially if you have pets that like to eat things and stuff like that. So welcome to the most boringest corner of the garden. It just looks so boring. So these are our carrots here. They're usually so full and doing so well, but this year I kind of changed things up and I went with more of a pelleted seed, because carrot seeds are so small, so you can get pelleted, so you can lightly and perfectly place the seeds. Okay, I realized really quickly that is not my style of gardening. I am one to just, toss in, cover, and not really cover actually with carrots. You don't want to cover too much. I don't want to give you that information. But just very lightly, so that way they don't just dry out from the scorching sun. But they're not coming in as nicely and as healthy as they always have. Like, they don't look sick, they just don't look as full. We're not going to have as many carrots as we used to in the past, so I would never do it that way again. And nor do I like the tapes. I know everyone's like, use the tapes. I just like really handling the seed in my hand and seeing it there. I'm old-fashioned that way. That's just how it goes. And then we've got a nice little morning glory that's popping up. We seeded these ahead, so this is a plant, but I also snuck in a few directly sown morning glory seeds in there, so those are popping up right over here. And we did that in the corners. And I always do the directly sown along with the plant with those, so that way it gets really thick and heavy. So that way once this plant starts kind of climbing up, the little ones are starting to come up and they fill in on the bottom and they have something to really trellis up. And then we have some more oregano on the corners here. I kind of just threw that in different places just to kind of, you know, it's just one of those things where it can get overpowered by other tall varieties, and if it doesn't see the sun, it's not going to grow. So we kind of just placed it wherever, you know, it would have the best opportunity to really take off. And then in between we have the Verbena bonariensis and some snaps just for that additional color, because right here are some of our kale plants. We have more in our food plot out there. That's where we focus more of our larger amounts of growing food. But in here we like things that we like to quickly grab and eat and use for meals. And I love kale chips. I could go on a rant about kale chips, but we're not going to do that because I've already taken up too much of your time. And I'm really trying to get better about staying on topic. So we've got some of that. We also have some of the lime basil that I talked about didn't take off too well over there. It seems to actually be doing a little bit better over here. It's still tiny, but I think the mint has something to do with it over there. And over here we've got the borage, which is actually, or you can call it borage, however you want to pronounce it. As you can see, it's a pollinator. It's got bees around it. It's also completely edible. It's considered an herb. It will volunteer a lot of seeds if you allow it to seed out now that it's flowering. Once the flowers are dead, it'll seed out. But the reason why we're growing more of it this year, and you'll see another patch of it, is they said that it's a really good use for a carrier oil. So I'm going to try to distill it and extract the oil and see how much oil you actually get. If you don't produce a lot of oil, then it's not going to be worth it, because a carrier oil is the carrier oil. So it's like an oil that doesn't carry much scent, and it carries the more stronger beneficial essential oils inside of that. So you need a lot of it, and I don't want to be distilling for months just to get carrier oil. So we're going to kind of play around with that this year. And then over here, because these will be chopped down soon, it's not going to last all season like this. It starts kind of getting brown, and it kind of like wears itself out. So once you cut it down, it can grow more, but you're actually better off just sometimes even reseeding some of that. So once this is cut down too, then we also have more tomatoes here. So these are an Artesian tomato, and I've never really tried these before. They're called bumblebee. So it's a small, I guess I could describe it as like a cherry tomato. I don't know if it's going to be sweet like that, but it's just a smaller artesian round tomato, kind of like a sun sugar. Flavor, I don't know if it's like a sun sugar, but just the shape. And then over here we have mugwort, which is a very highly medicinal plant. This is going to get huge. This can actually get 3 to 4 feet. Which I'm actually hoping it does. We did a mirroring effect with these gardens, so that way when you walk through you have the tall mugwort on each side, so it's more symmetrical, because if you're going to do something crazy tall, it's kind of nice to have one on one side, one on the other, especially when you're walking through an opening of the garden. So that's kind of where like the design comes into, like intermixing varieties. So knowing the heights, the widths, and everything like that helps you, design your garden better and make it come together more harmoniously than ever before. So just by growing it helps you know that. And then on the end caps we have some Altaranthera again, but these were started by us before I realized that we had a lot of volunteers. So it'll be kind of cool. There'll be a lot of them, so we'll kind of see what happens with those.
Okay.
So this garden mirrors the other garden with all the way up over to here down to the borage. And then we have some Nicotiana, which, I mean, it's a hit or miss. I just don't know if I love it. It's better directly sown. So it smells really good. So it does draw, bees and stuff to the garden. So that's a plus. The hummingbirds actually like it too. So that's another plus. But it just doesn't have longevity like a lot of the other plants in the garden. So I don't always use a ton of it, but once in a while it's okay to be as a stuffer. And then over here we have our rosemary. Our rosemary is like something that we also distill teas. We're going to try some tinctures. I like having it and drying it dry for eating in our food, but also just for burning. I love all kinds of herbs for that, but rosemary is one of my favorites. It smells really earthy and fragrant in that way, and it's awesome. And then over here on this end, we did a scarlet runner bean. So I always love scarlet runner beans. I love how it gets those beautiful purple flowers and the big dark purple bean that hangs down. And it's just kind of coming out of a funk. It had thrips. And we do use organic spray on our plants, so we did use some Monterey. We've showed that in past videos, and we can show that again this year. I think it's always good to refresh, especially once you're having those problems. But I did also directly sow some morning glories here, so that way we have two types of vines kind of mixing up. And morning glories are a little bit more aggressive, I feel, in my experience, than the scarlet runner bean. And then we just kind of have a little random flowering kale. So this really isn't one that we're like, you know, harvesting to eat or anything, but it's just really pretty. This one isn't going to get tall either. This is more of a lower growing. It'll get nice and large. What I love about flowering kale is it adds that really cool textural look to a garden or a container. But then once it starts cooling down and everything else starts looking kind of this kind of comes in, and it really gets very, very vibrant. The cooler the weather is, the more vibrant the flowering kales get. And you'll see too that I use that a lot, whether it's the lower growing or the large crane series, which is a cut flower series. I don't cut them all the time, sometimes, but they're more appealing in containers. And then we have our nasturtiums, which I always love nasturtiums. Edible. We talked about this in video 1, but just appealing too with the bright, vibrant colors. It just looks like summertime. It's really not a garden without the nasturtiums. You know, you gotta have the nasturtiums. And then we have the snapdragon, some Victoria blue salvia, and some more millet grass here. These were really small ones. I don't know if they're gonna do too much. I almost feel like this corner here needs a little sprucing up, but we'll kind of see what happens. I've got tons of extras, and that's why I always keep a lot of extras too on hand, because sometimes things kind of burn out, die out, overwater, underwater, whatever it is, or they get eaten by a bug, and then it's just nice to have something to fill in. So this is one of those end caps that I'd really like to spruce up. I don't really know what I was thinking when I did this one, because I just did little snapshot snapdragons, so they don't get tall, they don't really do anything other than just bush out and stay short. The color is beautiful, but I feel like there needs to be more of something going on, especially down the main walkway, but that's just my visual design eye, so I'm not really too worried about that at this point. So over here we have sweet wormwood, which is also one that we're using this year for medicinal. So then over here we once again have the millet grass, and then we have our Brussels sprouts. So the Brussels sprouts are going to get super tall. You want to make sure to keep those in your garden. Even let them get hit with a freeze, because when they get hit with the freeze, it helps sweeten up the flavor a lot more, and they're really tough to get off. So you may want to use like a sawzall to kind of cut them off the edge, because using a knife is going to take a lot of effort. So then in between, we also then put some Verbena bonariensis. We seeded a lot of it, so we just kind of stuff it in here and there. And I know that that will get nice and tall, but these get so tall, and they've already got a larger head start than the Verbena, so they'll grow faster than the Verbena at the point that they need to, which is right now. So over here is Feverfew. This is actually one that I am really excited about this year. It's another medicinal, and it's used, one of the main things I want to try to use it for is migraines and headaches. I have 2 family members that really struggle with this, and if there's any way that I can like help them in some way with using this, whether it's a tea, tincture, oil, I don't know. We'll see, and this is one that was on our top of our list this year, so we'll learn more about that and share that along the way. And then over here we've got more calendula, just for harvesting that flower. So it won't be pretty in another month. It'll get its flowers pretty soon, and then and fill in. But then after that, it kind of, you know, it can stay there, but it tends to be very prone to aphids. And I don't want to, even if it's organic, I don't like having to keep treating something. I feel like it just no longer makes it as potent of a healer of its properties that it has. So if that's the case, once we harvest the first batch, it comes up so quick, and if you just directly sow it with its seeds and we'll just do it that way then. So that's also one of those that you just kind of follow along and do what you have to at the time. And then just on the end we have some morning glories. I know we have nothing for them to trail up, but I always kind of just force them this way, and then they kind of just trail over and down. And then right here too, of course, a nasturtium, and then some snapdragons to kind of, it's one of those large ones that is for a cut flower, but we use it for trailing and kind of coming out crazy. And might spruce and touch and add in a few things there too. This is the time where everything's in now, everything's starting to grow in. But we have so many leftovers to where I sometimes stuff some things in, and as long as it's not around something that it's going to take over, I will stuff it in there. So yeah, you guys, we're on our last bed. We did it, we made it. So let's get through this bed. I know it's been a lot and maybe even a little bit of an information overload, so you may have to watch it twice, or a specific bed that you want to see more of. So let's get to it so we can kind of draw this video to an end to allow you to get off and do your thing today and garden and play and whatever you want to do, work. So let's start off with this end cap here. So I just did some coleus on here. I love coleus. And then we did some of the hot lips salvia here. Hot lips is another big one for the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love it, and so do butterflies, but I see a ton of hummingbirds on it. And then I might spruce up something to kind of come trailing down. We'll see, because it's still only like mid-June, and you don't want to add too much because things are just starting to root in, and once they're really rooted into that soil of your garden, that's when they start flourishing and growing and widening and growing tall and flowering. So you don't want to like stuff in too much before you allow it to even get a chance to show you what it's got. Alright, so down the middle we got some Heliochrism here. So this is the double mix Heliochrism. So we're growing that just like we talked about in the first part one in the other gardens. And we also have more of this into our ground bed. So we're harvesting a lot of it. I really want to try to make oils with it. Heliochrism oil is actually super expensive. I don't know if you've ever looked it up or tried to get by it, but it's super expensive. And not that I'm looking to harvest it to sell it to somebody super expensive, but it's for our own use. Alright, so we kind of talked about that in the first part one, so you can kind of check that out there. And then on this side over here we have the lemon basil, and in between each lemon basil we have the snapdragon. So we did have lemon basil in one of our beds across in part one, but I love lemon basil. It's one of those that we're going to use for multiple purposes, so the more we can grow of it, the better. And I still have a whole tray of those plugs of these as well. So we'll kind of like play around with that, have fun. And then on this side too, we have the cinnamon basil. So we did a different type of basil on this side. So we're really utilizing our space because these Heliochrism are going to get a lot taller, 24 to 36 inches. And then these are kind of more of that medium height, so around 16 to 24 inches depending, because if you're counting the flower or not on each side. And then in between too, then we did the snapdragon, so that way you get some color intermixed with the herbs. And then over here we did an end cap that mirrors this end cap that we already went through. So the eucalyptus, millet, the double supertunia, and some blue Victoria salvia and all that good stuff. So we're gonna call it a day today for the tour. I hope you guys enjoyed this tour. I hope you guys can, you know, go back and take some notes of things that really inspire you, whether it's a pattern, the design, the layout, the type of plant, or to even inspire you to look up a new healing benefit for certain plants. I feel like that would be that I did enough just to inspire you to further your own knowledge in gardening and find a new passion in the garden. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. That really helps us with the algorithm. Also adding a comment, letting us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for more notifications. So thank you so much for all of your time. I know this was long and we appreciate you so much. Have a great day.